If there's one food that can represent the faith well, you know what it is? I think it's soup, because it is all these different ingredients all put into one little dish, and you celebrate diversity, but at the same time, a beautiful harmony and a unity. So this episode is all about soups. The internationality of soup basically means that no matter what country you're in, they all have a form of a soup. And so we're going to be going to 3 separate different regions to sample their soups. The first is going to be an Asian-inspired one, where we're going to actually just make an egg drop soup, as simple as that is, but oh, so flavorful. Another soup that we're going to do is going to be a black bean soup. It's going to bring together some Southwest flavors, and we're going to enrich it with some creamy textures of some black bean and some cilantro and cumin as well. So delicious, so earthy, and so satisfying. And the final soup may be a little tip-off to any of the countries that can celebrate corn, because we're going to do corn chowder, which is going to be creamy and with some delicious textures, because we're going to reserve some corn off to the side, and we're going to roast it. It's just awesome. So what we're going to do is get started. And I've got kind of the basis for all the soup. Obviously a pot of boiling water. But also we're going to be making 3 separate soups, but I've got to get it all together. You know, soups are one of these things where it can be as easy or as difficult to make. And sometimes soups are just as easy as what you have in your kitchen, leftovers, and you just kind of throw it in some stock. But what I've got to do is kind of prep it all out. And I'm going to use the different bases right now. I'm going to prepare them all, keep them off to the side. And to keep it simple for all of you, we're going to make each soup one soup at a time. But we're going to prep out all of the aromatics. Soup is generally warm, and you all know that soups can also be chilled, like a gazpacho, for example. But we also know that the soups, if they kind of sit in the refrigerator for a day or 2 longer, then the flavors get even, bolder, so to speak. But what we're going to do is get this onion together, just peeling it all out. Again, if you have your ingredients in place, it makes for a lot easier cooking process. And I love to say that that's kind of like an analogy for faith. If you get all of your ingredients together, then it makes it a lot easier to pray. Because prayer is just a different set of components that just get put together in one kind of like liturgy. And so we're going to get the garlic, onions. I'm going to get some potatoes going, a little bit of this jalapeno as well, depending on how hot or mild you like certain soups. So we're just going to prep all of these ingredients together now. So I've got my onions, I've got a little jalapeno, I've got my garlic and my potato all cut up. Now, corn is one of these kind of temperamental ingredients, because you can either get it super fresh or you're going to get it frozen. I'm going to help you out, because if you can get them fresh, you might even want to leave them in the husks and then kind of roast them in the oven at about 400, 450 degree, and it almost will kind of steam bake at the same time, and it'll turn nice and tender. But what I wanted to do is just show you a few different applications of it, because if you can't get it fresh, then you can just simply put it in a pan just like this and put a little oil on top of it, put it at a high temperature, and guess what? You're going to have a nice roasted flavor, and it won't feel like it is super frozen. But if you do get a chance to shuck them yourselves, and make sure you pull out all of the silks on it, because who wants a little bit of silk in all of this? You surely don't. Here's what I'm going to do is show you how to cut it all up and to be able to shave it so that you can roast it or we can even roast it whole. So a couple different ways you can make this application super easy for you. The first thing to do is to kind of make sure you've got a flat base, just like this, and then you just simply take your knife and you'll run down. And you want to kind of get as close to the center as possible, because there's a lot of flavor in there as well. But again, just making sure you have a nice flat base. But don't throw this away just so soon. You can actually just throw this some water, and some of the sweetness will kind of infuse in the soup itself. So delicious. This is the way God is. Nothing in God's eyes goes to waste. The soups we're preparing in this episode are definitely hearty. They're thick and they are rich in flavor. But they're rich in flavor and hearty not because of expensive ingredients, not at all. As a matter of fact, what we're putting in these bowls of soup are actually very simple. Some might even call it poor man's food. Corn and beans and egg. And it just kind of goes to show that simple ingredients can make for a beautiful experience. And you don't need all that expensive stuff to get the real richness. That richness comes from a simple but beautiful, profound faith. So in order to make the corn chowder, which is going to have a little bit you're going to need some time with it. That's all there is to it, because we're going to slowly kind of roast the corn out. And I'm giving you two applications. Remember, one is going to be to keep it kind of whole. You can also keep the ear in the husk themselves, but it is going to have to take some time because these get really hot. So if you're going to pull these off, just be really careful. You might want to just use like a paper towel or a rag or something. And then if not, you can either shuck them in advance to keep the cleaning process easier, or you can even use some frozen. And here's what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we drizzle a little bit of olive oil on it all. And then we're also going to make sure that it's all coated evenly. And then we're also going to add to it some salt and some pepper as well. So just a little bit of salt and pepper, and then in an oven of about 450 degrees or 400 degrees, because we don't want it to go we don't want it to cook too quickly. Something like this, the patience is definitely worth the wait. And you know, one thing about soup, it requires you to have boiling water, and there's nothing that will give you more patience than watching water boil. So into the oven it goes. But for right now, I'm going to make the easiest of the soups. This soup is one that I learned when I was a kid. You get it at Chinese restaurants, and it's a simple dish called egg drop soup. And the best part about it is you can add a whole bunch of different things to it if you want. And all it's going to consist of is some eggs, water, salt, pepper, soy sauce, and some starch, some cornstarch as well, and some scallions to give it a nice freshness to it all. So we've got some water that's boiling right now, and I'm going to actually make sure that it doesn't boil too quickly. When they say you can burn water, that's obviously not possible, but what they're talking about is if you kind of heat the pan up, depending on what kind of pan you have, and it kind of burns on the bottom, some of that smell will actually bleed into the water itself. So be very, very careful, even boiling water. But super easy. We've got a couple cups of water in here. And here's what we're going to do is we're going to crack some eggs, beat them lightly. And we're also going to start mincing up some of the scallions. Why don't we use, for 1 cup of water, 2 eggs, just to keep it simple. You could make it as eggy as you want. I kind of like mine a little bit more thick, just because it kind of, how shall I say, gives it some texture to a really silky texture on your tongue. And here we're going to beat this not finely. As a matter of fact, we want to kind of keep it, not so beaten to the point where it's kind of like a puree. So we've got the water boiled out, and what I want to do is just add a little bit of cornstarch to it, which will thicken it all up. And this is about maybe a teaspoon of cornstarch, and I want to add about 2 or 3 teaspoons to it so that there are definitely no clumps, all right? Maybe I added 4. But what you want to do is make sure that it is not in any way going to turn solid, because it will make this kind of a gummy texture, and you don't want that whatsoever. And timing is key here, all right? Because as soon as you see that the cornstarch is fully incorporated, you've got to add the eggs. And I'm not going to even, I think I might even take it off the heat, because I don't want this to turn the eggs kind of rubbery. We just want to keep it definitely nice and silky smooth. Then we're going to add it some white pepper, salt, and some soy sauce and some freshness of the scallions. All right. So here we go. We've got this. I'm going to make sure that I use a little fork here. Going to stir this all up, and this will help thicken the water. Now that that's in place, eggs have to go immediately. And this is what gives that kind of silky, webby-like flavor to it, is by making sure that you just beat it at the same time. And guess what? This soup is almost done. The only thing that is missing now is some seasoning. Some salt, some white pepper. You can also add a little bit of black pepper if you want as well, just for some flecks of color to it. And then the only thing after that is to just basically use some of the scallion leaves if you want. I'm going to take a few of these, keep it nice and fresh. And then guess what? Top it off with a little bit of soy sauce to give it kind of that earthy flavor. And soup from Asia is basically done. Now let's get some soy sauce in there. Mix that all up, and I'm just going to have it sit on the side. Perfect. Give this a little stir, and soup number 1 from Asia is done. Oh, this brings me back to when I was a kid, no doubt. Oftentimes, soups come as the appetizer or something to kind of prepare the diner for the rest of the meal. It's an interesting concept because soups, in a way, can help to prepare you for the greatest meal of all, obviously the Eucharist. And so the next time you eat soup, think about how this prepares your appetite for the true feast in heaven. All right, now we're going to be adding some butter and some olive oil to a little saucepan, because we're going to be making the base for the corn chowder itself. It's nice. It's going to be sweet. It's going to be rich. It's going to have a thickness to it and also some texture, because we're also going to be blending this all out. So let's getting this sauteing. We're going to saute the onions, some garlic, some of the pepper itself, and then the potatoes until it kind of cooks down. Adding a little bit of milk to it, cream at the end, salt and pepper. It's going to bring out the best of flavors, but we also need to get the corn. So as this is melting away, let's get the corn out of the oven and see what we've come up with. I know that it was at 400 degrees. We probably let this cook down for about 15, 20 minutes. It's going to have, obviously, some caramelized parts to it. Really delicious. It's going to bring out the nice sweetness. Again, if you wanted, however, to keep it less brown, then just keep it in the husks themselves. All right, so here we go. Let's saute some onions and some of these other aromatics as well. Onions, and then the pepper, and then the garlic. And also the potatoes. We can throw these all in here too. That way they just cook nice and easy. Smells so good. You can see that this soup is going to have a nice savory quality to it, but also a nice sweetness to it as well. Now that we've got most of these, however, shucked, we're going to shuck the rest of them, add it all together, and then add the cream. So once again, be real careful if you're cooking with this. Make sure that it's cool enough for you. Create the nice base for it. Let's just get the rest of these shucked out. Okay, now that I've got all the corn kind of cooked down and scraped off the husks themselves, I'm going to add it to the onions, to the potatoes, to the garlic. It smells so good in here. Just add these all in. And then we're going to add the milk as well, because it's going to thicken up on its own, not just from the starch that comes from the corn itself, but also from the potatoes as well. So, here we go. We've got about 4 cups of regular milk. Let this cook down. We're going to season it with salt and pepper. Beautiful. As it boils and thickens up, it'll create that chowdery texture to it. And if you want, you can even put some clams in here as well if you want. Or, if you want, you can even add a few more little vegetables to it as well. But right now we're going to keep it nice and basic and simple. So we're going to season this up with salt, pepper, and cayenne powder. And we are going to make sure that you kind of taste as you go along. So you can always add a little bit more, but you can't take away. So just take a little bit of time. This will give it some nice little heat. We're going to add the heavy cream at the end of the process because you don't want that to curdle. And basically, we're going to let this continue to cook down for about maybe 10, 15 minutes until it thickens up nicely. But between now and then, we're going to move to soup number 3. Making a soup takes great patience because you have to wait for the water to boil. And there's nothing more frustrating than to wait for something. But even in making soup and in eating soup, because if you go into it too quickly, you'll burn your tongue. And so you have to give this a little bit of time. And in this fast food mentality world, we know that making soup and even eating it can teach you the great virtue of patience. All right, now time for soup number 3. I've got some olive oil. Ooh, this is going to saute quickly, so we got to be careful because we don't want to cook it too much here. So let's just turn that heat down a little bit. We've got a lot of things going on here for these soups because one soup is already done, one soup is on its way to cook, and the other we're making right now. So we're basically sweating down some of this garlic and onion all together. I've got some chicken stock warming up because now to this we're going to be adding several other ingredients to make this black bean soup with some beautiful Southwest kind of flavors to it all. And so what we've got is some canned beans that we've kind of strained and drained. This is actually going to get pulsed eventually, so we've got 2 types of textures, a nice creamy smoothness and some little flecks of this as well. So what we're going to do to this black bean is we're going to add some onions to it, like I said. We're going to add a bay leaf to it all to kind of, impart this really zesty flavor. And we want to keep this whole because we're probably not going to eat this. You're going to obviously want to strain this all out when you actually do the serving. We're going to season this up with a little bit of salt, pepper, and some cumin as well. That will help to bring out the juices and the flavors. And some cumin as well. Cumin's got that real earthy kind of flavor to it. All right, and out of this, what we're going to do is we're going to add the strained liquid. The liquid is strained from the black beans. Add right to it all. And now from there, we add just enough stock to kind of cover this whole thing. You can see the internationality of it. When I think of soups, strangely, but maybe not so strangely, I actually think of the church, because the church is made up of different parts, and yet we all come together somehow, the way all these different soups are going to be composed dishes in and of itself. But for right now, time to add the warm stock. And again, just enough to keep it all covered. And we're gonna let this cook down for about 20, 25, maybe even 30 minutes on a little bit of a medium-low heat. And we'll see what happens when we come back after all that this just gets cooked down. In the culinary world, cooking soups is a big deal. It's not as easy to do as people may think. That's why there are a lot of canned or boxed soups already made for you. But what I want to do is give you an experience to test out a harmony of flavors, a balance, different ingredients put together and working well with each other. You know what that is? An image of our faith. It's an image of our church. A whole bunch of different groups coming together, and although they are different, they will work together in what we call a harmonious blend. And it will definitely make you think that in this bowl of soup is a balance of God's goodness. Okay, so what we've got right now is just me fishing out these bay leaves. You don't want to eat them because they are so sharp, so you got to be very careful and make sure you strain all the bay leaves out of it. And we only put 2 in, and I got them. We've got the corn chowder going beautifully right now. It's thickening up well. I added to it about a cup and a half of cream. I'm going to drop the heat down so that it's on a low simmer, and we're basically done. That egg drop soup took nothing. This took a little bit of time so that all the flavors can kind of congeal and come all together. But what I've got to do now is give it that texture and give it about 2 or 3, maybe even 4 pulses, so that they have a little bit of the puree action, at the same time keeping the integrity on some of the beans. But you know what? Maybe 5. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is start plating all of these together, and I think you're gonna enjoy these soups. All these beautiful flavors coming together, kind of like the way our faith does. Different parts of our liturgy brought all together in one beautiful celebration. So, 1 bowl for each of these soups. We'll start off with the egg drop soup first. Real simple, and I'm gonna garnish this again. You can see the silkiness of the egg, and that came because we allowed the cornstarch to basically to thicken up the water. And then to this, we're gonna add just a couple extra little shavings of fresh scallions. There you go. Just a little more right there. Now, with the chowder itself, thickened up beautifully because the starch from the potato as well as the corn itself. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Here you go. We're just gonna put some of this in here, and we're gonna garnish this with just a little bit of that little jalapeno pepper, just to put it right on top. And then, boom, boom, boom. All set with that. Now it's time for the black bean. You know, one of the beautiful things about soup, again, is that it is so comforting, and every culture has a form of soup. Oh, here's what I was gonna do with this one to make it even more fun. Add some tortillas. Let's crush some on the bottom, just right there. Add some of this soup on top. We're gonna add more to it. A dollop of whipped cream, of some creme fraiche or some sour cream will do it, just to even give it a little bit more thickness. Oh, this is so delicious. And like I said, every culture has its soup. And you know, it just shows how, like, in a faith life, if people come together and they're able to, how shall I say, share from the one bowl, that's gotta be love, huh? And if you want, you can even just put a big bowl out and have people scoop as they go along. So a little bit of sour cream right on top. That will help to continue to thicken things up. And some fresh cilantro, which we're gonna just do a nice little quick rough chop right on the top of it all. Nice rough chop. Oh my gosh, it's so flavorful. And then of course, You can even just add some more tortillas right on top, just like that. And what you've got, folks, are some delicious soups that bring all these different flavors together. The diversity, yep, but true technique will bring about the harmony. And that's exactly what we're learning as we savor our faith and savor these soups here on EWTN.